Unsiloed podcast is produced by University FM, elevating the stories of your institution.
I'm Greg LeBlanc, and welcome to the Unsiloed podcast. And I'm here with Vivek Wadhwa, who Vivek he has a tech background. He's been involved in a lot of startups and then decided to make the shift for whatever reason over to teaching in academia. Oh, that's right. Yeah. You talk about that in your book. And decided to, try that out, and also have been a very prolific writer and speaker. And we've had you here at Berkeley on a couple occasions, and you're cranking out books with some regularity. I'm really, very impressed. The most recent of which is this one, from Incremental to Exponential, and we'll talk about this. This is such an important topic, one that all of us here we have sort of similar interactions with companies. A very, very important topic. But there's a couple others I would definitely recommend to viewers and listeners out there. This one right here was the one that came out just before that. Your happiness was hacked. We'll talk about this one too, because I think this is really important about how to manage your interactions with technology. And then, the one before that was this one, the driver in the driverless car, right? And this one is also, I highly recommend this, impact of AI and robotics and other things on the future. So welcome, Vivek.
Hey, good to be on with you, my friend.
So let's start with this book. And by the way, all of these are co-authored. You've got Alex Salkiver, who's your co-author in all three. And so I want to start by focusing on this one, because in the book, you're really trying to help legacy companies understand what they need to do to succeed and how to really become more like startups. Now, there's a whole industry. I mean, there's probably hundreds of us here in the Bay Area who more or less make our living trying to help these companies. And I always wonder whether or not we're really just snake oil salesmen, right? Because I use this analogy in another podcast. I sometimes feel like the oncologist who, sometimes has to give bad news to the patient, but knows that the patient really wants hope. And so, you have to decide, like, here's if you do this, you might survive, but probably, you should think about spending your last days with your family. You know what I mean? Like, how do you, is it an unrealistic thing to think that the legacy companies can reinvent themselves? And to answer this, we have to sort of describe why so many of them don't and why they can't, and then talk about those who can and what they need to do to survive.
Hey, Greg, what you just said is completely wrong. I used to sound just like you not too long ago. I mean, I had published many papers on entrepreneurship, amongst the most cited papers on entrepreneurship. If you read my TechCrunch columns from about 12 years ago, I was going on, rah, 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 startups are going to eat David is going to defeat Goliath. The startups are going to win. And I used to mentor startups and so on. And then, I predicted the end of all of these, legacy companies, the fossil, the dinosaurs and so on. We even call them dinosaurs, right? And then I started realizing that, oh my God, these companies are not all of them. I mean, at best, I'm talking about a third of them, okay, at best. But even a third of them is pretty substantial, because that's 3 times the survival rate of startups. So, a third of them really are, figuring it out, that they're reinventing themselves. So I'd written off the entire Indian IT industry, for example. I said it's going to be toast. And yet it figured out how to reinvent itself. Microsoft, okay? Microsoft, all of us wrote it off. It was the evil empire, it had faded. And then Satya Nadella came along and he reinvented it, right? So I started looking into this. And Ismail Amla, who, co-authored it with me, he's actually a student of mine. He was head of IBM's North America Global Services Division. He brought me in. I mean, he got permission from Jenny Romedy to bring me in because IBM had become a hopeless cause. And I spent a lot of time with him and IBM Japan and so on, trying to teach them these advances. And parts of IBM were reinventing themselves, which was very surprising to me. right? So even the monoliths like IBM, there was hope for parts of IBM. Now, the problem. So I'm glad IBM had a management change because Ginny wasn't the right leader for the job. Irvin is trying to do what Satya Nadella did and rethink the entire company and take it back to its roots. But what I learned was that the leaders of companies who understood exponential technologies, exponential advances, who understood that their company was doomed and they could not continue in the mode they were, they had a good chance of reinventing themselves. And then I came to another conclusion that not only don't they have do they have a good chance, they eat David for lunch now. That the startups don't have any chance against them. Look at how Facebook has decimated everything in its path. Amazon, right? It's destroying everything in every industry it touches. Okay, before we criticized Microsoft for doing that. It was the evil empire. These guys make Microsoft look good. I call Zuckerberg Darth Vader because he's truly evil. I mean, I used to be a big fan of his. I used to communicate with him every now and then. And now I wouldn't even bother to give him the time of the day because he's become so powerful that he's using the forces of good to do evil, right? So, but the fact is that these big monoliths, if they can get the right leadership in place, and if they can, the leaders take the chances, they can eat everything in their path, and they gain immense powers. And what the book does is it starts off with me eating my words, saying, I was wrong, and here are the secrets of big companies innovating. I mean, it's the sort of thing. If you can't beat them, join them.
Well, I mean, I think that Nadella is like a great example of now, normally when people think about legacy companies, right, they're thinking about, Macy's and General Electric. They're not thinking about Microsoft. But look, by 2010, Microsoft was a legacy company, right? I mean, they looked very much like a company from a previous era. They weren't embracing these new technologies. I think the story you tell in your book, I find very compelling, which is that people use this term disruption. They throw it around a lot. It's probably the most popular word out there. In fact, if I'm always asked, hey, can you talk about disruption? And nobody really knows what it means. I think everyone's heard about Clay Christensen's model, and a lot of times if they've read it, that's what they think disruption is. But you point out that that's not what we're talking about here when we see disruption. That was sort of a very specific model of disruption, which was sort of the bottom up disruption, and in the steel fabrication and so forth. And your argument is that, and I definitely agree with you, is that nowadays when we think of disruption, it can come from anywhere, and that the attack surface is really like spherical. It's not just the bottom up. Could you talk just a little bit about how you see the threat?
I basically have a hall of toast in there because I don't use the word disruption. I use toast, right? So basically, yeah, entire companies, entire industries are going to become toast because they're going to get run over. And Christensen, I think he was a great human being. By the way, I was a big fan of his. I read his books, and just like all at Haas, I mean, you name any MBA school, they still teach his stuff as if it's sacred. That this is how disruption works. Wrong. Christensen was disrupted about 5 years ago. His theories were a casualty, just like the things he wrote about, because he postulated that you're up here and the threat comes from down here. And what he taught about CEOs was that look, they start scaling up and they start becoming a threat. Here's how you do them. It's not like that anymore. It's like being in a car and you're looking front and you're looking back. You're going to get hit from the side. You're going to get hit from below. You're going to get hit from the top. No one's going to get you from the most obvious places because the disruptions aren't coming from your industry anymore. It's coming. There are two kids in a garage with an exponential technology which come out of nowhere and start threatening you. So therefore, if you now go by his methods, you have departments of innovation. You do a certain set of things to watch out for the disruptions. You can see where it's coming. So it's like being on a ship. You've got people watching one side of it to see where the disruption is going to come from. It's not going to be what you think. So those methods don't work anymore. Christensen's theories have been disrupted. So now what you have to do is you have to, be aware that disruption will come from everywhere, and you need to have all hands on deck. It's no longer R&D departments that specialize in developing some specific technology. It's everyone in your company, right? Down from marketing, customer support, sales, your engineers, of course, finance. Everyone now has a role in disruption in helping you reinvent yourself. That's what the message of the book is.
Well, first of all, I love the term "Hall of Toast," right? Because I think you and I have both been going around saying, this industry's toast and this company's toast, and if you're not an English speaker, you probably have no idea why charred bread, what that has to do with anything, but there's definitely a hall of toast, and your point about kind of designated innovators, right? This is one way in which a lot of these legacy companies have responded. They've looked at Silicon Valley and they've said, I want some of that, right? I want you to take the magic sauce and put it in a bottle, and then I'm going to send some people out there to imbibe it. And Silicon Valley has attracted an enormous number of innovation hubs, outposts, innovation offices, innovation arms. Sometimes it's in the form of a corporate venture. Sometimes it's, you mentioned Ford's Greenfield Labs, right? There's a whole bunch of those in the automotive industry and so forth. And then the idea is that these folks on the ground in Silicon Valley will be scouting for the new ideas. And then, more like scouts in the military, you have the people way out there on the head of the troops to keep an eye on the enemies. And you argue that this has not been a successful strategy for the most part, that it's been a failure. Why do you think it's been a failure?
Yeah, because what the CEOs think is they'll set up a Silicon Valley lab, and suddenly the electricity will flow from Silicon Valley into their headquarters, and magic will happen. It doesn't happen because, first of all, they come over here, and no one gives a damn who they are. You take the biggest names there, Ford. Who gives a damn about Ford over here? Walmart came over here. My God, do you think anyone would, in their right minds, want to join Walmart and have Walmart Silicon Valley on their resume? I mean, you have all these big names, very respectable companies. But when they come over here, then they get the bottom of the barrel talent, because your students, they want to work for Google or some hot startup. I mean, you've got Berkeley, some amazing companies in your labs. They want to work with these companies. They don't want to work for a legacy, old stodgy old company. And especially when you have Toyota coming over here, you have Fujitsu, all of these companies from all over the world coming over here. No one even knows what these companies are around here. So they don't attract the top talent. And what happens is that the people who move over here get cut off from headquarters. They're no longer part of the company's culture or values. They no longer have the contacts over there. So if you look at all of the things that happen, they become islands which essentially dissipate. That they don't have any impact on the company's functioning. So all of this is, I mean, Walmart figured it out. I mean, Doug McMillon, the fact that I've got Walmart as a case study in there tells you how much of a change he made over the last 5 or 6 years, because he also realized that the old methods weren't working. So he brought in a new team. He had the new head of innovation reporting directly to him. He broke all the rules. Walmart buying TikTok. My God, I mean, even I thought that was crazy. I mean, who would have thought that a stodgy old company like Walmart would think this big? But the fact is that Macmillan gets it, right? But it took him coming to this realization and breaking all the rules to get this company now to be a real threat to Amazon. Otherwise, Amazon would have turned them into toast. But now Amazon's only credible competitor is Walmart.
Right. I think the organizational structure is always an issue. The people who are here, they're not part of the mothership. They don't have the kind of face time. They don't have the political contacts and connections. I've seen examples of this where some of my students have gone to work for some of these outposts, and they just have a heck of a time getting heard by the people back in headquarters, wherever that is, whether it's Detroit, New York, Paris, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Silicon Valley lab, big deal. They're not competition for us. We don't have to, they're not going to impress the bosses. They're not going to get the promotions. So ignore them.
Well, I think related to that is if you can't send a company to Silicon Valley, bring Silicon Valley to the other location. And you recount a couple stories. So Frederick Terman is kind of a demigod here in Silicon Valley because of what he was able to do with Stanford University and really kind of create the whole ecosystem around Stanford University. He's called Father of Silicon Valley, and so he was asked to go and reproduce the magic in other parts of the country, like New Jersey and Texas, and I've worked with a number of governments that have been interested in trying to create, Silicon Valley of the steppes, or Silicon Valley of the desert, or Silicon Valley of the, of the plains.
There's 400 of those at last count. 400 of those, Silicon Valley wannabes, all
Yeah,
failed.
and well, so why have they failed? I mean, shouldn't there be like a template or a how-to, and then you just you bring it to the place, and if you have the right irritant, you should be able to grow a pearl, right? And Michael Porter, I remember Michael Porter was writing about this back 30 years ago. He was saying, how do you create these innovation? I remember it was industrial policy. So Japan allegedly had this very successful industrial policy, and that they were the big threat. And so the idea was, hey, we can one up them on industrial policy.
These clusters,
and then,
that was another disaster.
Yeah.
Every single
Yeah.
cluster that he prescribed has failed. I mean, even Monitor Group has failed. I mean, complete disaster. That's what happens when you listen to, the Harvard management gurus. Listen to Berkeley instead.
Well, I forgot to mention that you are, in fact, at Harvard Law School right now. That's you've been at Carnegie Mellon. You've been at a number of schools, but Harvard Law School has been your home for the last year or two.
But that's
why?
law, so forget the law school. But to answer your question, okay, Silicon Valley can't be replicated because you need much more than a few people. It's all about culture. Okay, the fact that we interact with each other. I mean, you go to parties over here. I mean, I remember coming to Silicon Valley 12 years ago and bumping into Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, and I was like, oh my God, Mark Zuckerberg's here. And then you bump into Mitch Kapor. I mean, all of these people, and you just go up to them and they talk to you like normal people. So it's informal. You go to any coffee shop over here and you ask someone, what are you doing? First of all, they'll start telling you about all the things that they failed in. They'll, show off about their failure, and then they'll openly tell you what they're doing. Try doing that anywhere else in the world. I mean, people listening to me from, Santiago, Chile, or God knows where else. I mean, go to, a coffee shop there and ask some developers what they're developing, and they'll clamp up saying, who do you work for? Why are you spying on me? They won't tell you anything. Come here and do the same thing. And people start bragging and sharing ideas with you, because so it's knowledge sharing. It's the climate. I mean, beautiful climate over here. I mean, it's sort of, you're next to Tilden Park. I mean, you want to get away from the world, you go hiking for an hour and a half, 2 hours in Tilden, and you clear your mind up. It's like going to a different universe. And you go down to the ocean. Napa, if you want to go and try some new wines, you go up to Napa. I mean, what you have here is sort of almost magical in terms of having all of these ingredients for people challenging each other, for people interacting, sharing ideas, and then job hopping. That people jump from one company every couple of years, and non-competes don't work in California. So you're not allowed to take code with you, but what's in your head goes with you, and it leads to an amazing environment where you have innovation like nowhere else in the world.
Well, that non-compete law is actually something very interesting. Now you're at a law school, so you can comment on it with even greater authority. I mean, obviously, if a beautiful environment was enough, then Christchurch, New Zealand, and Cape Town, and even Santiago would all be competing with us. And so obviously there's culture, but the culture seems to flow in part from that law, which allows people to job hop with much more freedom and without fear of litigation. And so the ideas do flow very, very, very freely, as do the people. And so you're very skeptical about the ability to reproduce, although we're starting to see all these companies leave Silicon Valley and go to other places like Austin. Do you think that could generate a similar critical mass in some of these other areas? And of course, Microsoft and Amazon are Seattle companies. We always have to remind ourselves that those are not, Silicon Valley companies.
Hey, Greg, they're going to go there 2 or 3 years from now. They're going to realize that they've aged, and they're not doing anything. They're going to be left out. They're going to be irrelevant. With I mean, so they're big fish in a little pond over there. They're going to be irrelevant in the real world, and then they're going to come flocking back over here, right? That's just the way it goes. Every few years, we declare the end of Silicon Valley, and some people move out, and then they start boasting about it. So you've got a bunch of people who went to Miami saying, "Look how wonderful it is here." Well, that's until the next hurricane hits Miami, and then they realize that there are all sorts of other problems in Florida. So they may not be paying taxes, but they don't have the quality of life that they had here as well. So this happens. It's not that Austin won't have some good companies and won't have some good stuff happening there. Steve Case has been talking about the rise of the rest. Yes, other regions are learning. So they do develop competent centers. Bangalore developed into a competent center. Shanghai developed into a competent center. It takes a couple of decades for that to happen, and then a lot more has to come together before that magic happens. So, and by that time, in the next 10 or 20 years, by the time these centers do become something meaningful, we'll be on to the next revolutions, the next set of technologies, because everything is advancing exponentially. So the stuff that they were building, they will become less relevant. Will they be up to date on the newest innovations? We don't know. Will Silicon Valley be up to date on that? That also we don't know. So that's just the world Silicon Valley lives in.
Yeah, my favorite analogy from the book is this idea that Clay Christensen's model is really like the frog in the water that slowly comes to a boil and then it realizes it's too late. And today's disruption is really the frog's just hanging out and finds a gigantic vat of boiling water landing on its head. Right? It's much more abrupt. You mentioned sort of the 8 deadly sins of kind of top down innovation, and I wonder if you could say, I mean, when we look back and you see the Bell Labs, right? Bell Labs was successful, right? Xerox PARC was successful for a while, and these were top-down kind of innovation structures, right? You had your R&D department; their job was to figure out the stuff, and then the rest of the organization would harvest those ideas and commercialize them and so forth. And you argue this simply can't work in today's world. What are these 8 deadly sins that you're talking about?
Greg, I don't have the list here in front of me. I wrote the book, a year ago, so I just failed that test over here.
Right. Well,
But
I think a couple of them are fairly straightforward, right? Like listening.
the principle is it's about culture, values, it's about organization. I mean, it's about how you do things. And in the book, I try to bring out the magic of Silicon Valley. I mean, why does it work? I mean, how can companies reinvent themselves? About the culture and the values, the risk taking, building platforms. Those are the type of things I started delving into.
Well, I think some of the things that you talk about in terms of changes and the reason why that model isn't going to work anymore, in part has to do with the idea that, brand is no longer something you can really build your business on. Intellectual property is something that's going to be difficult to build your business on. So the whole idea of a long-lasting business, right, and competitive strategy in the old days was you build out a brand, you get this brand equity, and then you can kind of coast on it for a while, or you build out some intellectual property and you get a thicket of patents and so forth, and then you can kind of ride that out for a while, and now you really, the half-life of these sorts of resources is really quite short.
Exactly. I mean, the old saying about no one ever got fired for buying from IBM. Who gives a damn about IBM now, right? So you go through the big brands. Brand no longer locks in the customer. Apple has kept a tight grip on an elite set of people. But if you go outside the United States, go to India, go to China. Apple is just for a tiny, tiny segment of the population. What 2% of the outside the United States, in many countries, it's like 1 or 2% who have that. So its brand no longer has that value, that it used to have. So, but the fact is that we don't buy products based on brand anymore. I mean, before you would take an ad out in a newspaper, and the brands would publicize their brand, and you'd buy them because of that. Nope. How do you decide to make a purchase right now? You go online. You go through the Amazon reviews. You know that the Amazon reviews are suspect. Then you'll go to a couple of other review sites, and then you'll go on social media to see what your friends say, and that's how you decide. Basically, it's based on what other people tell you. And you're not looking at, just because it's made by Gucci or Fendi or, Apple or whatever, that's not what makes you decide to buy a product. You buy it based on the value it provides you. And if they don't keep, innovating, you're going to dump them in a heartbeat. I mean, when virtual reality becomes, we can talk about exponential curves, but VR is going to become a big thing in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. It doesn't matter. We're going to basically buy the VR headsets based on what's the most amazing technology. Whether Apple releases it or Hyundai releases it or some startup we've never heard of releases it, it doesn't matter. We're going to buy them based on the value that we get, the innovation that's in the product. That's the way it goes now.
Right. So for companies to, at least legacy companies start acting more like startups, really the idea is that they have to take innovation, and rather than having this kind of dedicated innovation team, they have to kind of build it into every aspect of the business. I've gone around for the last couple of years saying, every company has to be a technology company. Everybody has to be a software company, platform company. And another perspective is that every company has to be in kind of the innovation business. There has to be a production process whereby ideas can get originated at scale, evaluated at scale, and then executed or implemented at scale. And so when you talk about the cultural transformation that happened at Microsoft, it was really about converting the organization into one that really listened to the ideas that the people had within the organization. You offer a lot of great stories about how ideas can originate at pretty much anywhere within the organization and ultimately hopefully get executed on. So what are the obstacles to this kind of cultural transformation where people have to learn to be receptive to ideas and learn to be listeners rather than simply advocates?
Well, let's take Microsoft as an example. I mean, go back to the days of Steve Ballmer. Watch his videos. He was like, it's us versus them, right? He's a sales guy basically, and it was all about ruthless execution, killing the competition, not working with anyone. Microsoft was an evil company that it would eat everyone inside. No one trusted the company, and if we went inside Microsoft, they were all in their fortresses that everyone hated each other. They were competing with each other. It was competition, cutthroat, right? That's what the entire Microsoft was. So you had the Windows team, which is sacred. I mean, Bill Gates built Windows. Steve Ballmer didn't have a vision, so he simply preserved Gates's vision of protecting Windows at all costs. Every new product around Windows would get killed if it was a threat to Windows. That was a culture that Satya Nadella inherited. So what Satya realized was that this was not the company he wanted to lead or that could succeed. He realized that he needed to have his people working together. He also needed to, win over developers. That it's because one of the things I talked about in the book is building platforms. For platforms, you need to get the community building on top of what you have, right? So developers of Microsoft were antagonized by it. They feared it. The Microsoft treated them like the enemy in many cases. He had to change all of that. He had to get companies to trust it. So what did he do? He embraced Android even. He accepted Android. He accepted Red Hat. I mean, he actually ended up buying, a number of technologies. He basically opened up the company. He said, okay, Windows is no longer sacred. He changed the values and cultures of the entire company and got them to be more humble, saying that, we could be out of business. He got them to realize the fact that Microsoft is no longer this empire that it was. It's a decaying empire. So with humility, leading by example, he got them to realize that there are new things that they have to focus on. Instead of focusing on protecting the Windows platform, he said, okay, let's focus on cloud and let's focus on these new technologies. He guided them through it. He got them working together. He motivated them, inspired them, and voila, Microsoft has become, it sort of competes with Apple as to which is the most valuable company in the world. And we like Microsoft right now. I mean, developers like Microsoft. They don't consider it a threat. It's a trusted company. So even in politics, I mean, I talked about Zuckerberg being Darth Vader, evil, evil, evil. Amazon, ruthless, less evil, but still, a threat. I would never say that about Satya Nadella. In fact, Satya Nadella's humility. I mean, I've known him for a while. I mean, when I wrote to him saying, Satya, I've got a new book coming out. I really want you to read it and give me an endorsement for it. It took me, 3 emails to get it, to get it because he was in the middle of the other things. As soon as he did read the email, he says, Vivek, absolutely. And then he spent the time, reading it, and then he gave me, actually put him on the front cover of the book. So this is how proud I am of having Satya Nadella, endorse the book, because I consider them to be a good company. That's not what I would have said about, Steve Ballmer's company, right? So I want to associate with Microsoft. So, but this is how it is across the industry right now. That because they change the culture and values, people want Microsoft to succeed. They want to be part of it. So that sort of starts from the top. It has to be at the CEO level. It flows down to the bottom, and then it goes sideways. Basically, your customers begin to realize how you are, because if customers see a cutthroat culture, they immediately turn off from the company. The developers no longer saw that evil cutthroat culture. They saw an open, inclusive company that they wanted to work with. That's how it works.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the world is divided into people who are pro tech and anti-tech, and I think you're someone who shows that it's really not about pro or anti-tech. There's your pros and cons cut across tech and non-tech, and that there's in spite of the fact that you're one of the biggest advocates of much of many of these new technologies, you're also someone who spends a lot of time warning us of its dangers. And in this book, I think you began the book by talking about the heart attack that you had, which opened your eyes to a lot of things. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, why you're wary about how technology is affecting our lives, both our personal lives, but also our work lives.
Yeah. The 3 books that we talked about. So, Driving the Driverless Car is part one of From Incremental to Exponential. This covers the core technologies, everything from AI to quantum computing, to synthetic biology and all of that. So, because this is what I teach, I've been teaching in my classes, what I teach corporate executives as well. The core technologies, exponential advances, convergences, disruptions, new innovation methods. Along the way, Alex Salkier actually started pushing me to do it, saying, Vivek, we need to talk about how we're becoming addicted to our technologies. The fact is that all of us are addicted. We're checking email. We wake up in the morning, we check email. We go to bed late at night, we're checking email. We're traveling home from work, we're checking email, right? We're now exchanging text 24/7. When we have any free time, we'll start watching some TikTok videos. I mean, the kids, from the time they're like 6 months old now, they seem to be on their iPads and so on. And the result is that teen suicide rates are high. We're not aware. All the studies about happiness show that we're less happy than we ever were. So everything good that should have happened hasn't happened. Instead, we become addicted, and it's become a big problem for us. So what happiness was hacked focused on was explaining to you what the tech industry is up to over here. They're trying to make you addicted. That Zuckerberg and all of these companies, they use the same techniques that were used by psychologists to get people to go to casinos, to smoke. Essentially, you get people addicted. There were experiments done in which they put pigeons in cages, and what they found was that if they gave them unlimited food, they would not eat it. They would basically eat until they were full and then stop eating. When they gave them small amounts of food, and then took it away, they became obsessed with eating, right? It was a reward system, the way these things, and they did the same thing with mice and with other animals. And what they figured out was that there were techniques to make people addicted. So you get rewards, so that when we get an email thing, you got mail, right? Suddenly that's a reward, right? We become addicted to it. So all of these techniques that they use to make us addicted. That this is a plot to get us to be on online, 16 hours a day, so we can sleep for 8 hours and maybe sleep for 6 hours and eat for 2 hours or do other things for 2 hours. But the rest of the time, the tech industry wants us to be online so that they can maximize their revenue. So it's all a diabolical plot by the tech industry to keep us hooked. So the book walks you through the psychology behind it, the techniques that have been used, and says, okay, here's how you outsmart the tech industry.
So what's particularly pernicious about this, right? Because when we think about, say, pre-tech, companies have been manipulating people forever. I mean, governments, everyone's manipulating everybody, and you think about in-store design, right? So if you walk into a grocery store, and you actually talk about this in your book, the layout of the grocery store is designed to make you buy more stuff, right? And the way they locate the stuff, and if the stuff is at eye level, you're going to buy more of it, and if it's down below, you buy less of it. And if they put the chocolate by the cash register, you're going to throw that in the bag. And the casinos were manipulating us long before they had electronic slot machines, right? So they would manipulate us with all sorts of noises and the cash and the best bells and the whistles and so forth. So, and of course, cigarettes are probably the least technologically sophisticated product out there. So what's the discontinuity here? Is this are we just replacing smoking rates are down, and I think they're probably down because the phone is satisfying that same craving. You're waiting for the bus and you're bored. So you used to light a cigarette. I certainly did back when I was, 20 years old. And now if you have a half a second of boredom, you whip out the phone. Isn't the phone kind of healthier than the cigarettes as a dopamine fix?
Yeah, but we wouldn't, well, chain smokers did, but most people wouldn't smoke 16, 18 hours a day, right? And as far as going to the supermarket goes, you only go a couple of times a week. Casino, you go maybe, once every week or 2 weeks or so on, right? Here, this is with us wherever we go. We go to the bathroom and people take their phones with them to the bathrooms. They go to bed, they take their phones with them and put it right next to their beds. So it's with us all the time, that these devices track us, they follow us. And then, like I said, we have a fear of missing out, that you want on Facebook or Twitter and you're eager to see what did I miss out on. So you start scrolling through to see what your friends did while you were gone, your fear of missing out. And then what happens is that you see your friends all posting their vacation photographs, or they had this wonderful meal, they just did this, they did that, and you feel jealous. Before, keeping up the Joneses, maybe your neighbor would buy a nicer car than you have, right? And you felt jealous of that. Now you're seeing your childhood friends, your school friends, now flying in first class or traveling in a yacht, or going on some exotic vacation and having a great time, and you feel left out. It's with us all the time, and everyone comes to us now to tell us how they're better than we are. So it's making us depressed. It's making us unhappy.
Well, I mean, I think machine learning is just playing such a huge role in this, right? So if we think about really the limits of what you could know about what is addictive in, say, an analog casino environment versus what you can learn when you have a digital casino environment, right? If you put people in, I mean, you used to have to rely on kind of laboratory experiments to figure out what configuration of slot machines would, yield the highest revenue. Now you can run massive field experiments on tens of thousands of slot machine users, and so the insight, the behavioral insight that we have now, is just exponentially greater almost than the behavioral insight that we had before. And so I think that's kind of what's driving these addictions to such extreme levels, is just how much more we know about what works and how much more we know about human behavior through the data gathering that we can do through digital interfaces.
Military-grade technology is being used against us. I mean, we have no hope against AIs and data. Everywhere we go, we're being watched. Everything we do, we're being watched. It is a conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the slot machine is a great example, is a kind of a great metaphor for what you're describing, because when we think about say a recommendation algorithm, or we think about a news feed algorithm, and I'm actually more of a fan of Facebook than you are, because I manage my Facebook news feed very, very actively, and their goal is to maximize engagement and to maximize. And so if you're someone who is disciplined about it and you don't actually hover over the cat videos, then the cat videos, they disappear from your news feed. And if you click on The Economist all the time, guess what? You get a lot more of The Economist. And so if in fact
the trouble is that you don't know what you're missing out on then. Like, so it's like on YouTube. I'm very careful what I watch on YouTube because I'm afraid I'll get more of it. And but the result of it is you're not getting the balanced news. You're not getting the things that really count. You're getting more of what you're being radicalized as an Economist reader. You're becoming more of a academic Berkeley professor than you might otherwise have been. So they're deciding.
I'm not so sure about that because I looked at my Facebook. They have the feature set, and apparently I'm a radical liberal according to Facebook, but Amazon recommends MAGA hats to me. So I don't really understand what they think
because
about
Amazon
me.
and Facebook aren't sharing data. Obviously, they don't like each other. But the rest of the world, sees you as this radical liberal because to start with, you're at Berkeley, so that itself is a qualifier over there. So they're ahead of you. You may have gone on Amazon and bought something which made Bezos think that you're a hidden Trump Nazi or something like that.
I bought these 3 books there, but I mean, look, for an economist, economists believe that everyone is an autonomous, rational agent capable of managing all their decisions. I'm talking about sort of a neoclassical economist, and so they would argue, hey, this algorithm is if they want to maximize profits, they'll just show you what you want. And now, of course, a behavioral economist says, hey, hold on, there's what you want and then there's what you want. And those are very, very different things. And everyone might want heroin, but nobody wants to be a heroin addict. And I think the casinos are a great example of they call what they do loyalty, and we have a loyalty scheme, and we have a customer satisfaction objective, which in reality means making sure that they leave with as little money in their pockets as possible, right?
But you just have to look at America to realize where this has taken us. We don't have to guess anymore. You've got the reason why we had Donald Trump, and the reason why these people there was an insurrection at the Capitol was because we radicalized them. Forget about ISIS. We built our own ISIS here thanks to Facebook because it radicalized. So you're aware, you're astute, you're able to manage to get decent news on your Facebook feed. But these people have gotten more and more and more, and Facebook wanted to keep them hooked, so it's kept feeding them more of the same poison that they were, and they basically got into these filter bubbles, and they started believing that they're right. They went, the people who went to D.C. and took over the Capitol weren't evil. They became radicalized. They began to, they began to believe it was patriotic for them to do this. It was the right thing for them to do. And therefore, they did what was right, for America. They were doing it for the nation. They were doing it for our children. They were doing it because they believed they were doing good, not because they were doing evil. And what caused that to happen? Facebook, YouTube, all of these technologies that gave them more of it, and they saw the world nothing different than their radical views. They thought that this was everyone is like us, and they were saving the world. QAnon, okay, it was the same thing. That it's a bunch of pedophiles that are ruling this country. Therefore, we have to go and kill them. That's what we've already seen the results of this. I wrote this book, about 2 or 3 years ago, before it was the in thing to talk about it. And, the things what the book said would happen, happened.
But how much of this is just a sort of a temporary adjustment? I mean, okay, it may be long-lasting temporary adjustment.
My friend, it ain't temporary. We've radicalized America. These people aren't going away. We're now going to have to worry more about domestic terrorists than we have about ISIS. ISIS never made it here, but we built our own ISIS. Because these people believe that they're, just the ISIS people, they're doing it in the name of God. That this is why, so the reason why they commit suicide and blow other people up is because they believe that it's God's will that they do it. We built our own ISIS over here. the white nationalists, and associated because we radicalize them using technology. We've seen the results of it already.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. I'm an historian, and so I kind of want to take a slightly longer perspective. And if we look at the introduction of the printing press, I mean, this resulted in 100 years of religious conflict. You could argue the entire Protestant Revolution was just a byproduct of the printing press. And you could argue that Hitler really was a direct result of radio, right? I mean, radio enabled this, but those technological innovations, we kind of learned to adjust to them over time. Could it be that through efforts of people like yourself, and there's a ton of other books out there about kind of digital responsibility and trying to manage your digital life, and as people start to realize their vulnerability. I mean, smoking rates went down because people learned that smoking was bad for them. Is it possible that people would kind of learn that, unregulated exposure to manipulative technology will ultimately be bad for them? I mean, we know that depression's we've got loneliness, we've got depression, we've got failing relationships.
Greg,
there are a lot of things that you point to.
The problem has been that you have a bunch of billionaires who've been deciding what's good and what's evil. Okay, imagine if we had kicked Trump off Twitter 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, right? How much better the world would have been, right? But it took an election loss before Zuckerberg and Dorsey realized that, hey, we better do something, otherwise they're going to turn on us now, that they're going to come and burn down our buildings. So suddenly they had this realization saying, oh, we're doing it, we're doing this in the name of national security. I mean, they had a religion change because of a political change, right? But they had gained so much power that they live in their own little ivory towers and they're able to dictate what happens over here. So
that same power is what enables them to exclude someone like Trump, right? If they weren't monopolies, they wouldn't be able to more or less shut down.
But we knew this was happening 3 years ago, and it was clear when Trump got elected that something had really gone wrong with social media. We knew it 4 years ago. We knew it 5 years ago, right? But these people were making so much money that they chose to put their money ahead of their moral values. It took employees of Facebook now, telling Zuckerberg that they won't tolerate this anymore. It took a rebellion within Twitter to get Jack's attention. But it took a long time for that to simmer up. In the meantime, a lot of damage was done to the nation, to humanity.
Yeah, I want to circle this back to the conversation we were having earlier about corporate culture and productivity, because the same phenomenon that happens at work, where we are addicted to our phones and our devices and distracted and incapable of long periods of attention. These are impacting our productivity. And in the workplace, I think you mentioned kind of the slot machines of work, right? And it seems like these slot machines of work, if they're not really getting more productivity out of us, and so in a sense they're not. If the companies were as good at designing workplaces as they are at designing casinos, then even if the employees were miserable, at least they'd get some more productivity out of them. But you seem to be suggesting that the companies actually aren't doing a very good job, and that the constant barrage of stimulus in the form of Slack notifications and Jira notifications and email notifications is actually impairing productivity, and it could potentially explain part of the productivity paradox that I've talked about with some other guests.
Yeah, I mean, getting all those notifications, all those noise. Some companies are waking up to it, and they're limiting, the number of interactions. They're encouraging, their employees to just disconnect and brainstorm with each other. Anyway, they're trying different techniques. So companies are realizing that something has gone wrong, and many of them, like I said, are implementing more sensible policies.
Yeah, you mentioned something like no meeting days, and email that automatically kind of shuts down, and people disabling. What have you done personally to help improve your productivity. And how do you manage your relationship with technology?
Greg, for one thing, I shut my computer off, at 8 in the evening. I mean, this is why I tell people you can't reach me by email after 8 because what I realize if I, keep checking it, then I won't be able to sleep at night. So a couple of hours, before, I think of going to bed, everything goes off. And then on weekends, I just try to say, okay, I'm going to this whole day, I'm going to leave it off, right? Now, I got to admit that I do slip up every now and then. That it's very hard not to check email on weekends. But my goal is to keep it off. So you do simple things like that. You put your blue light filter on so that if you do check email, it's not impacting you effectively and so on. Um, and what I do is that I don't receive texts anymore. I've told my friends, if you want to contact me, send me email. So even I don't and I have I leave my phone on DND. Okay, so my children have the different numbers they can call. So if it's an emergency, but other than that, my phone is on do not disturb. So I don't get because the worst thing here is text. People expect you to respond to them immediately because you're on your mobile, but I don't do texts. So there are things like that you develop your own policies essentially.
That's very 20th century of you.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, but if you want to contact me, that's why I tell people that you can't call me. So because my phone is always on do not disturb, you can't text me. So email, I basically dictate, when I'm going to check email. So so when I'm sitting here on my computer, yeah, you've got Outlook open there, so I can take a scan and see anything is important or not. But other than that, I'm available in batch mode. I can be responsive as I want to be on. It's a good balance for me. For everyone, it's different. For me, email is a balance that I can check it whenever I want to, respond to you whenever I want to, and people aren't expecting me to respond to email with sub-seconds as I would text.
So what are your thoughts about the increase in remote work? We've seen for the last 9 months to a year a lot of just massive transformation of the workplace. And in your book, you talk about how face-to-face interactions are just so much more effective than email interactions, and at least for people. There's people on the spectrum who may have a different response, but the FaceTime and the physical presence is dramatically different from electronic interactions, and we've moved to a world where pretty much all interactions are electronic to one degree or another, and it looks like we're probably going to stay like this for a while, never go back completely to what we had before.
But we're sort of getting fed up of it. I mean, the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, we'll all get vaccinated, so that this COVID thing will just be something in the back of our minds, and then we're going to get fed up of talking like this. This is good for a while, okay? So we'll do more of this than we ever did before. But we need to be back at the office and interact with each other. We need to start sucking up to our bosses so we get our promotions. We need to start, catching up on the gossip in person, going out to lunch again. We start going to walks in the park with our work buddies and things. We already longing for that. So we're actually coming full circle. So it'll never be this, exactly as it was before. We now accept the fact that we'll watch more podcasts. We're spending more time, we can be remote and so on, but we are going to yearn for that interaction as we had it. One of the questions you were asking me earlier was about why I stopped teaching, because I tried teaching remotely. It just didn't work. That for my classes, my son Tarun teaches with me. We would always have half a dozen or dozen amazing ideas coming out of our classes, and students would say it was life-changing, that they start companies that do amazing, incredible things. This year we taught remotely, zero. I mean, I would get emails from students. Every student, not every student, a majority of students would write afterwards and saying, how grateful they were for the class that they had and how life-changing it was. Last semester, zero. It's not that we didn't put effort into it or we didn't do anything right, but the magic didn't happen over the internet. It doesn't. This is not conducive to innovation. This is what companies are going to realize. Right now, it's like rah rah rah. Hey, we can save money, we can still be productive. No, they're going to find that the innovation just didn't happen. It didn't happen as it did before. So all these people who moved to Austin, moved to Miami, they're going to be like the outpost that it came to Silicon Valley. Bye, it was good knowing you. You can do some grunt work for us. You can fill out some forms. You can, do some coding for us if you want to. But the people who are at headquarters are the ones who are going to get the promotions, who are going to now lead the next big projects.
Well, Vivek, thank you so much for coming. This is for the last hour. I've actually resisted the urge to reach over and grab my phone. I kind of even forgot that it existed, and although we couldn't actually be sitting in person across from one another, enjoying a meal or a drink, this has really been the next best thing. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully
But I want to go out and get
see you again in the
a couple of
flesh.
margaritas with you, get smashing drunk, and then talk about the gossip at Berkeley. And I'll tell you about CMU, and we can talk about what else is happening in the tech industry.
Okay,
Nothing like
we'll
that.
have to do that sometime soon. All right, thanks a lot.
All right, my
We'll
friend.
see you soon. Okay.
Unsiloed podcast is produced by University FM, elevating the stories of your institution.